Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be telling you 5 common reasons why your crayfish may die. And the last one is super important, so make sure to watch to the end. Let's get into it. In number 1, we have poor water quality. Now this one's like kind of a silent killer because some crayfish are really good and tolerant with like bad water conditions, and others will just die straight away. So sometimes you don't really know, and it can be kind of sudden. But if you suspect that your crayfish has just died randomly, it's probably something to do with the water. So obviously the best option is just to clean your tank more. You can get stuff from pet stores as well, which can get rid of bacteria in the water, but I haven't really done that. And another really good tip is just to cycle your tank before you put your crayfish in. Just in general, you try to avoid making your crayfish like a breeding ground for yucky bacteria and infection and all that sort of stuff. So the more you try to avoid it, the better, because that means your crayfish is less likely to catch diseases and stuff. Or sometimes crayfish just die because the water just isn't favorable for them. It just doesn't work for them. And if your crayfish is trying to escape more, that's probably another sign it doesn't like the water. Also, try to avoid putting water from creeks and rivers that your crayfish isn't exposed to, because that can contain bacteria, which is bad for your crayfish, which in turn just kills it. In number 2, we have inadequate diet. That just means not feeding your crayfish the stuff that it needs. This can mean like vitamins and calciums and all that sort of chemicals that your crayfish needs to help grow a healthy shell and generally just live longer. Now, the easiest way to solve this is just to feed your crayfish more foods that have different chemicals like veggies and brine shrimp and all that sort of stuff. You can feed them like just a bit more than pellets, because that contains all sorts of other chemicals and stuff that they need. Like cuttlefish, for example, has a lot of calcium, and they need that to make their shell. So just make sure to vary their diet. Don't feed them one thing all the time. Okay, and third, we have other animals and other crayfish. Now this one's a bit of a debatable topic, whether you can keep fish with crayfish, and I've been over this quite a few times, and I do have a video of a bunch of compatible fish with crayfish and that you can keep. But the issue is, even with compatible fish, there is a chance that your crayfish will still eat it. Like, it isn't a 100% thing. It's less likely, but it can still happen. That also means that there's a chance that your crayfish might get eaten by one of the other animals instead of your crayfish eating it. I mean, this doesn't happen as much because obviously the fish has to be pretty big, but there still is a chance, and it has happened before, especially with dwarf crayfish, which are a bit smaller, and places where when crayfish don't have enough places to hide, they definitely could get eaten or hunted by other animals. And that includes other crayfish, because crayfish are not very social. They just end up killing each other a lot of the time. Even during breeding, there's a good chance that both your crayfish may try to kill each other instead of breed. So I think you have to keep that in mind. If your tank is too small, you just really can't keep lots of crayfish together. It just won't work. So the best option is just to try and avoid it. And if you really, really want to, just get a really big tank. That's if you really have to, just get a really big tank. That's like probably the closest thing to a solution you can get. Like, there's still a chance that they'll fight, but it's less likely if you give them room. But you have to give them a lot of room. So if you're willing to do that, yeah, sure. But I wouldn't do it myself. In number 4, we have molting complications. Now, this one's really common because obviously every crayfish has to molt. Even though adult crayfish molt less, it still happens. Now, the most common thing will happen is that your crayfish will be trying to molt, and then it will either get stuck in its shell, or after it's molted, it will be weak, and other fish or crayfish would attack it whilst it's weak, causing it to die, which is why you shouldn't keep them together, like I said before. But even if your crayfish is isolated and by itself without predators, there's still a chance it won't recover, because it's a long, tough process for your crayfish, and obviously not every crayfish can deal with it. So the best option is just to feed your crayfish lots of calcium and stuff beforehand, so that it will have all the stuff that it needs when it's ready to molt, and leave tons and tons of hiding spaces. Make your crayfish as comfortable as possible. Give it all these options to hide. The more places it can hide, the better. Crayfish love to hide. Give it lots of places where it can hide and just molt if it wants to. It's just the best option. I mean, molting's really out of your hands. There's not much you can do about it, but the best thing you can do is just help your crayfish do it yourself. Not every crayfish will survive, but you can dramatically increase your chances by giving it lots of hiding spaces and feeding it the stuff that it needs. Also, try to keep the water quality, like I said before, really good, because your crayfish can catch stuff whilst it's molting, so make sure your water is clean before your crayfish molts. Then at number 5 we have the biggest killer, shell rot. Shell rot is really bad for your crayfish, and it's really common too. If you're wondering, this is what it looks like, and it can definitely kill your crayfish. I'd say the best option is just to try and prevent this from happening in the first place, but it does happen a lot, and one of the biggest causes is also not having clean water and having lots of bits of food in the substrate. That's really bad for them. Overcrowding, stress, all that sort of stuff contributes to it. So the more you try to avoid it, the better, but you can't always stop it. There isn't really one particular cure, but the best option if you know that your crayfish has it is just to slow the infection down until the next molt so that your crayfish can do it. You can do this, or you can give it a salt bath as well, but I haven't had to actually do this before. You can use Melafix, which is a chemical that you can buy at pet stores, which is meant to be good for your crayfish, but once again, this hasn't happened to me. I don't think I've actually lost any crayfish to shell rot, as I try to keep my tank as quarantined and safe as possible, and I don't know if it actually is in Australia. I mean, it probably is. I just try to keep my tank as quarantined as possible though, so I probably haven't made any of my crayfish catch it yet. So that's probably the best option, but other than that, this is a really big killer, and yeah, there's not as much you can do about it. If you're new to this sort of stuff, I definitely recommend watching my pH video, because that also explains in depth a little bit more about pH and all that sort of stuff and other water parameters. And I have some other really good ideas and tips on my channel, so you should definitely watch that if you're new to keeping crayfish. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe.